Hey developers, welcome back to the programming fields. Today I'm back with the continuation of Livewire 3 series with Laravel 11. In the previous video of Livewire 3 series, we understood how we can bind data along with the form handling in Livewire 3. Now in the today's video, we are going to work with the form validation using Livewire 3. We will see the different ways to validate the form including Laravel form validation approach and Livewire form validate attribute. Also, we will see how we can use the Livewire form objects in order to keep our validation rules and customized error message separately from the component class. This will help organizing and optimizing our code. So I will cover everything you need to know about validating a form with Livewire 3. And I believe by the end of this video, you will have a solid understanding of how to work effectively in Livewire 3 for the form validation in your Laravel 11 projects. So grab your favorite code editor and let's get started. In the previous video, we already created a basic form with different input types and we captured the form inputs data. So if I will fill up the form and if I will click on submit, so yes, our form is submitting here, but here we can notice I have entered some random text here for this email field and same thing for this phone number. Alright. So currently we don't have the validation to check whether the entered email or phone number is correct. And same thing, if without filling up the form, if I will submit, this is allowing us to submit the form without filling it up. So we will have to restrict the empty form submission and also we will have to validate the email and phone number as well. So if I will come to the code snippet, here we have the contact form class and this is our contact form view. So from this view, we are capturing the form data on this submit and we are displaying those values here. So this is our form submit function and this function is bound with this contact form wire submit. Alright. So now here before submitting this form, we will have to validate these input fields properties. So if I will come to the official documentation of Livewire 3 and if I'll scroll down inside these features, we will have this validation. Let's open this and if I'll scroll down, then here this is the very basic and simple way to validate our input fields as we are already familiar with this in Laravel. So this is the Laravel approach to validate the form in Livewire. So firstly, let's start with this approach. Let's come to the code editor and here inside this save contact form, I will write the validation rule as $this and here I will call this validate function. Inside this validate function, we will have to create one array and here we will have to define the properties for which we will have to put validation rules. So first field we have name. So for the name required and here I want this name to be string and I want this mean as 3 and I will set max validation as 50 characters. Next we have the email field. So for the email, I will set validation rule as this will be required and this will accept proper email format. So as of now, I have defined validation rules for these two input fields. Now let's come to the browser. Let's refresh the application and now let's try to submit. Yes, we can see our form is not submitting now. That means behind the form submission, the validation rules are working. But we are not able to see the validation error messages. So we will have to capture those validation error messages in the form as we do in Laravel. So let's come to the VS Code editor. Inside this contact form, we will capture the error for this name and email. So here we will use error directive and if error has name, that means if the error directive has name error, then we will have to capture that message and we will have to display that. So for displaying the name error, I will be creating a paragraph tag and inside this, I will display $message for the name error. And after that, we will have to write an error block. Alright. And here we can give a class as text danger because we are already using Bootstrap 5. So we can use those classes Now same thing, we will have to add it for the email field. So here we will have to change email. Let's come to the browser. Let's refresh. Now let's try to submit. Yes, we can see the error messages are displaying here. Similar to the name and email, we can write validation rules for other fields. So let's complete this. We have the phone number. So phone number we need required and digits to be 10. After phone number we have the message. So regarding the message, we are capturing this from the text area and that will be required, and this will be minimum as 5, max will be 255 characters. After that we will have nationality. So the nationality will be only required because we are capturing the nationality from the drop down. So we will have the predefined options in the drop down to be selected. Next we have the gender. Again, this will be required only because we are capturing this from the radio button. So we will have the predefined set of values, and newsletter can be optional. So I won't set any validation rule for the newsletter. Now let's display these error messages in the contact form blade. So let's copy this and let's add it for the phone number. Let's change this as phone number. Next we have the message, nationality and gender. Yes, this is done. Let's come to the browser. Let's refresh. Let's try to click on submit again. Yes, our validation error messages are displaying here. Regarding this gender, we will have to display this in a different div because currently we have added in the same div and we added this as a display flags. So better we can create another div here, and inside this we will add this display flags class. Alright, and I will close this div just before this error message. Alright, let's refresh. Now let's try to click on submit again. Yes, this is fine now. Now similar to the Laravel, we can customize the error messages according to our need. So by default, this is displaying the default error messages according to the attribute name. So for this, we will have to define one more function in order to customize the error messages. So let's come to the editor. Inside this contact form class, we will have to create another function in order to customize these validation error messages. So here we will define one function, let's suppose protected function messages. So this will be our predefined function as we already saw in the Laravel. Inside this, we will have to return one array for the validation error messages, and here we will have to define the error messages based on the input fields defined in the validation rules. So let's start with the name. So firstly we will have name dot required, and we can set our messages as please enter your name. Next we have string. So we can set message as name must be a valid name. Let's duplicate this and add it for min and max. 3 chars long. Name dot max, name must not be longer than 50 chars. Next we have the email. Email dot required, please enter your email address. Email dot email, this will be please enter a valid email address. Next we have the phone number dot required, please enter your phone number. Phone number dot digits, please enter a valid phone number. Alright, next we have the message, nationality and gender. So let's add it quickly for the other fields. Yes, this is done. We have customized the error messages for the all input fields. Now let's come to the browser. Let's refresh it. Let's try to submit. Yes, we can see our validation error messages have been customized here, and the rules are working correctly. So here, this is the Laravel way to validate this form. But what about Livewire? Currently, we are working on a Livewire form. So also, Livewire provides the features to validate the form. So if we'll come to the official documentation again, And if we'll scroll down, we can see Livewire provides validate attribute, and this is for Livewire 3. In Livewire 2, this validate attribute will be different. So if you'll go with Livewire 3 validation rules for validating any input properties, then we can use this Livewire attribute. So how this will be working? So this Livewire validate attribute will be added for the every specific input just above that input. So let's suppose if we have the title property, then we will have to add the validation rule just above that. In our case, if we'll come to the editor, then we had defined the properties here. So for the name attribute, we will have to define the validate attribute just above the name, just like this. And here we will have to import this attribute in the Livewire. So we will have to use Livewire attributes and validate. So this validate attribute is provided by Livewire. That's why we will have to import it first. So in the validate attribute, we will have to pass the validation rule as what we need to validate. So let's suppose if I want this field as required, alright. And in order to check the validation rules, let's first comment this Laravel way of validation. And for the name attribute, I have added this validate attribute as required. In the form submit event, we will have to call one function as $this validate. Alright. So if we'll come to the documentation, here we can see Livewire executed this function. Alright. Let's come to the browser. Let's refresh now. Let's try to submit. Yes, we can see the validation rule has been triggered now. Same thing, we can add it for email. So here we can add validate required, and this will be for email. This will be for phone number, and this will be for message. So let's add it quickly for the other fields. Yes, we have added for required fields. Let's refresh. Let's try to submit. Yes, the required fields validations have been triggered now. Now we will have to add it for min, max and other validation rules as we already defined here in this validate function array. So in order to pass the multiple validation rule in the Livewire attribute, we will have to add it in the same way as we have added here. So we can simply copy it from here and we can add it inside this. Alright. Same thing for email. We can add as required and email. For the phone number, we have added this digits. For the message, okay. For the newsletter, we don't require these validation rules. Alright, rest everything is fine. Let's come to the browser. Let's refresh. Let's test this validation rules. Yes, these validation rules are working. So currently, for customizing these error validation messages, we used Laravel approach. So if we scroll down, then we can see we have overridden this messages function, and this is the inbuilt function of Laravel. Now in case if you are following the Livewire validate attribute here to validate the input fields, then we can add the customized error messages here in this validate attribute itself. Let's see how we can do this. Let's come to the documentation, and here if we scroll down, then we can see we have the custom validation message, and that we need to pass here in the message attribute just like this. So let's add it. So here after the validation rule, I will define the attribute as message and I will add it for name. So let's suppose I will pass the same message there. Please enter your name, and I will just comment this function. Okay, let's save. Let's come to the browser. Let's refresh. Let's try to click on submit again. You can see this displayed the default error message. Why? Because in the validation rule, we have more than one validation rule added here in the same validate attribute. So this message attribute is unable to determine for which rule this error message is added. Alright. So if I will cut these validation rules from here, and if I will keep required only, and if I will come to the browser, if I will refresh, now let's try to submit. We can see for the required, that means for the first validation rule, this printed this customized error messages. Alright. So in this way, if you want to customize the error messages and if you want to set multiple validation rules, then you will have to add the validation rule multiple times by copying this validate attribute. So now let's suppose if I will add it for a string mean and max. Alright, and let's customize the error messages. Alright, same thing for this mean and max. Alright, let's save. Let's come to the browser. Let's refresh it again. Let's try to submit. Yes, the first validation rule is triggered for the required field. Now I will check it for mean attribute. Let's try to submit. Yes, we can see this triggered the customized error messages as name must be 3 characters long. Same thing, I will test it for max. Yes, this is working properly. Alright. So we saw the Livewire approach to validate and defined the customized error messages for the validation rules. Same thing, we can add it for email address and other input fields. Alright. So it totally depends on your need. That means if you want to go through this Laravel approach, or if you prefer, you can choose this Livewire attribute way. But this will be more complex when you are dealing with the large form inputs. When you have 50 or 100 input fields in this single form, then this will look like more crowded because you will have to write the different types of validation rules and the customized error messages in this way. But no need to worry in Livewire. Just similar to Laravel, Livewire provides form object. As we already familiar with form request in Laravel, when you have multiple input fields, then in Laravel, we create form request to validate the form inputs and we define the validation rules separately from the controller function. So in the same way, Livewire provides form objects. So if you scroll down, then here you will be able to see form objects. So these form objects will be a separate file in which we can set the validation rules, we can display the customized error messages. So we can create it using the command line itself. So if you come to the terminal and here if you will check PHP Artisan Livewire, let's hit enter, then you can see you will have the command as Livewire form. So in the description it clearly mentioned this will create a Livewire form class. So we will have to create a form class for the contact form component. We already have a component name as contact form. So here I will create a form class for the contact form. So I will type PHP Artisan Livewire form and we will have to provide the form class name. So the component name and the component form class should not be same. So we will have to keep the name as unique. So I will give name as contact form request. Yes. So contact form request has been created inside this forms directory. So if we'll check out the code editor, inside this Livewire folder, it created a forms directory and here we have the contact form request. Inside this contact form request, we can see this already included this validate attribute and this is extending the Livewire form. Here the Livewire form is already included. So now in the next step, we will have to shift these validation rules inside that contact form request class. So let's select these validation rules and properties defined here and let's cut it from here. Now let's come to this contact form request. Inside this contact form request, let's paste it here. Alright, this is done. Now we will have to import this contact form request inside this contact form component. So here we will have to import it as use app / livewire / forms and contact form request. And this validate attribute is no longer required in this component class. So let's remove this. And now in the next step, we will have to execute this form request validation rules while submitting this form. So let's check out the official documentation. And here if we'll scroll down, we will have to create the object of this form request class. So let's create this instance. So at the top of this class, we will have to create the instance as public contact form request as let's suppose $form. It can be anything just like contact form request, just like user, or simply you can keep it as a form. Now based on this form instance, you will have to update the form as well. So inside this contact form, currently we have bound this wire model directive with the name attribute. But now after creating this form instance, we will have to update this wire model directive property. So if we'll come to the official documentation and if we'll scroll down here, so here it clearly mentioned when referencing the property names in the template, you must prepend form to each instance, because currently we are keeping the form validation roles separately as a form instance. So we will have to bind that instance name here with the every property inside this wire model directive. So our contact form instance is $form. So we will have to copy this form and we will have to prepend here with the wire model as form.name, and respective to this wire model, we will have to update this for the validation error message as well. Alright, same thing, we have the next field as email. So let's update it quickly. Yes, this is done. Now in the next step, we will have to update this form validate function here while saving this form. So instead of $this validate, we can use $this form validate. So in some cases, we can have more than one instance of the form. So while saving the contact form, we will have to trigger the validation rules for particular this form belonging to this component class. Let's come to the browser. Let's refresh. Let's try to submit. Yes, we can see all the validation rules have been triggered. So now let's try to fill up the form quickly. Let's click on submit. Okay, we have the phone number digits. Let's submit now. Yes, now it is saying property $name not found on component because we have added dump and die after this validation rules here. So now using this way, we won't be able to get the property name. Alright. So we'll have to change this property name because the all input attributes are defined here in this form request. So we'll have to extract those inputs using this form instance. So we will have to pass $this form name. So let's add it quickly. Yes, this is done. Let's come to the browser. Let's refresh. Let's try to submit now. Let's click on submit. Yes, now we can see we are able to get the submitted values. Now we are at the end of this video. We have successfully validated a form using Livewire 3 in Laravel 11. We saw the different approach to validate our form. Also, we saw how to deal with large input forms in the terms of validation and data handling. And I hope this tutorial will be helpful to you and that you are now more confident in using Livewire 3 for your form and validation handling things. In the next video, we will continue this for saving the validated form data into the database. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Your support really helps this channel grow. And if you have any questions or topics you would like us to cover, drop a comment below. I love hearing from you. And also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss any update from programming fields. In this channel, I have a lot more exciting content on the way, including advanced Laravel tutorials, Livewire components, some projects, and much more. So thanks for watching and see you in the next video. Until then, happy coding.